It's nearly 11 years now since Mongolia's first yokozuna Asashoryu stormed out of the sumo world with his bad boy title written in large capital letters. On his subsequent route to becoming one of Mongolia's richest men, the yokozuna himself has made scant reference to the events which ended his career. But ex-manager Mr Yoshida was part of them, and has used Takatoriki's large YouTube platform to provide his own insider's account, which doubles as a crucial insight into traditional Japanese business culture. Firstly, he of course accepts what CCTV makes it very difficult to deny, that a nighttime act of violence did take place on a Tokyo street. Yes, he grabbed the guy by the lapels and dragged him out of a taxi, Mr Yoshida begins, gesturing with his fist as if to confirm a punch or two was also thrown. And, after a nudge from Takatoriki, he hesitantly adds, "The guy wasn't just a regular man on the street, as reported by mainstream media, but a member of a gang," which makes him too fearful, even with Takatoriki for protection, to disclose the man's name. "We received some quite extreme messages at first," Mr Yoshida continues, "but in the end, we got him to drop his police incident report and settle out of court. And although he asks for the figure to be bleeped out, we can see from his lip movements that his team settled the matter for $500,000. However, as news of the incident had by now made its way to Sumo's directors, both Asashoryu and Mr Yoshida were summoned to the chairman's office and asked to explain themselves. Prior to that meeting, they were met by Asashoryu's own coach, Takasago, and key Takasago group figure Kokonoe, the ex-Chiyono Fuji, both of whom were sumo directors at the time, ostensibly for a prepping. So I explained everything to them, assured them it was taken care of, and heard from Kokonoe that so long as Asashoryu properly apologized, retirement would not be discussed, Mr Yoshida recalls. But when the time for apologies came, Mr Yoshida was fatefully left out in the corridor. And by the time a furious Asashoryu re-emerged from his meeting with the chairman and directors, his retirement had been sealed. "I was aghast," Mr Yoshida states, "and I asked Kokonoe why his assurances had seemingly counted for nothing. And Kokonoe said, 'Oh, the yokozuna volunteered to retire.' And I just went, 'What?' "So what do you think happened?" Takatoriki inquires. "It seems they ambushed him with a lot of those indirect phrases, passive cases, and difficult words exclusive to very formal Japanese," the ex-manager replied. "Asashoryu thought, based on our pre-meeting, that all he had to do was bow his head and wait for their blessing to continue. But he soon detected that events were taking a different turn, and that sumo chiefs seemed to be trying to make him offer to retire without using those words themselves. And suddenly, we are presented with the classic image of the vulnerable foreigner not quite sure what he's being asked to do. Even a man with a full Japanese high school education and 7 years at the top of the sumo pyramid might occasionally need a translator. And even native Japanese speakers might need a particularly complex and vague sentence rephrased. But how could a man of Asashoryu's pride and standing possibly bring himself to ask for a translator? Mr Yoshida certainly has his regrets over not doing more. "At least if I'd been in there with him to translate into plainer Japanese, we might have got this over with an apology," he says. "At least I could have told him not to jump the gun when he spoke and just apologize in the right places. Because it seems to me that he'd come to think, during the course of that discussion, that they were hell-bent on forcing him out, when the nuance of what they said may have left him a route back in. I think he still regrets those moments. But look, I'm not impressed with the way sumo chiefs handled it. It was supposed to be a simple apology, the discussion turned out to be completely different. Just say what you mean, for goodness sake." The impression that both he and Takatoriki give is that indirect Japanese was used as a means to trap Asashoryu. And Takatoriki adds that viewers shouldn't be surprised, for the same roundabout conversations abounded when both he and his student Roho found themselves in trouble. When things get tough, always try to make the other guy take responsibility, and if possible, without saying so clearly. In a country likeable for so many reasons, this is a pernicious streak, which runs through not only Sumo, but so many business and social situations too.